Mark, welcome to the Easy Conversations podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to exploring the work you do and share that with the listeners. I'm a huge believer in positive psychology, and I also firmly believe that a lot of the times our thoughts can really create the reality we perceive around us. And I'm sure we'll get into that and why I have that belief. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand that based on they can get really stuck in their way of thinking and then expect a different result in the world around them. And I think you have to start with the thinking rather than wait for things to change around you. I'm sure we'll get into that. But before we do get started with our conversation, I do want to give you an opportunity to share with the listeners a little bit about yourself, what's brought you here, and what it is that you do.
Thanks for having me on. First off, I appreciate being here. And I do believe in what you said. Our thoughts are very powerful. Our thoughts can dictate how we feel in a day and actually how we react to others. But my background, I'm a technologist by heart. I've been in technology for 30 years easily. The last 20 so years, usually been in a leadership type role within technology.
Mm.
Sometime in the early 20 teens, my older son was struggling a bit with happiness. He was a little depressed. And so I started sending him text messages every day, letting him know he was loved. And that kind of snowballed into what is now Take 2 Minutes. It started off with me just sending him messages, but since I'm again, a programmer by heart or a technologist, I automated that process to send him messages every day at noon. Then other people wanted the messages. And then through the discovery, I learned that it was people were liking the positive messages. And I thought, well, I should do more than just positive messages. It's a lackluster service, just positive messages in my mind. And so I was able to get in touch through my network of connections with a doctor of psychology at Duke University. And he just shared an endless amount of data with me about positive psychology and tests and case studies he had done over the course of 7 years about different activities that help people get into a more positive mindset. And I found some of that research he had done fascinating. The
Mhm.
fact it was black and white data showing how to get people into a more positive mindset. And so I took on the initiative to start building Take 2 Minutes from there to actually just help people with mental well-being. And Take 2 Minutes is a nonprofit. It's not something I'm making money off of. The goal of me being on like a podcast such as yours is to just share knowledge around mental well-being and share knowledge around how people can get into a better mindset through activities that are proven to help.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. And immediately, based on what you've shared about your background and your experience, the first question that comes to mind is stereotypically, as a technologist, and I also have an engineering background, there's a stereotype that we necessarily don't have the emotional intelligence or the soft skills required to sometimes work with people that may be struggling, right? As you were sharing, even with your own son, you were able to take a different approach rather than getting frustrated or not figuring out how to deal with that. So, as a technologist, were you able to bridge that gap for yourself?
That's an interesting question. I think I'm a different I'm a little different with it as a technologist. I think I do have the soft skills, which is why I've done well in a leadership role.
Mhm.
At the same time, I've been very much involved with everything pertaining to technology. I'm one of those people, I've stayed technically inclined. I still do things, but I've always had the ability to communicate well, very complex technology solutions with anyone who doesn't even know technology. And I think because I have some of those soft skills is what allowed me to develop this in a way, or at least understand personalities, understand people. Going back to even my type of leadership, I've been told, uh, not to pat myself in the back. Hopefully, this is just building clout for the how these activities help. I've been told many times I'm very empathetic as leader. I understand when people are going through things. I'm not one just to drive. This has to be done. I more drive that it's a team effort in technology, and you are part of a team with my team, and I try to have empathy and kindness with my team. And I don't lead through threats or this must be done at this time frame. It's more let's do this the right way and get it done. And leading through through caring. It's caring and kindness goes a long way, I think.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing from you is also that compassionate side where you're able to put yourself in other people's shoes and try to have that
Yeah.
level of understanding, even though you may not be fully appreciative of what they're going through, but just having that level of understanding can go a long way. So do you feel like often that's what's missing in that part of the workspace where people don't necessarily have that empathy, and we're often going around just trying to get things done, and we don't necessarily look at other people as just people that have real life issues? And I think that may feed into the work you're doing also to bridge that gap, but I wonder if that also in the workspace.
Yeah, I love that question. So what I think I would answer that with is I believe in in everywhere, in work, in relationships, even with your neighbor. Sometimes people are short to not hear someone's side. And there's always going to be disagreement in the world. Things you're not all going to disagree on things. I think we fall into a bad situation where when people don't disagree, they get angry with each other. Where in reality, especially in work, if you're working with these people day in and day out, and even people who are around you, instead of getting frustrated with your differences of opinion, understand where they're coming from. Maybe through understanding where they're coming from, you can then see their point of view, and maybe you're still right, and maybe you're wrong. Doesn't matter. But either way, you can have a better discussion around the differences in those opinions and you can understand someone. I think this applies to work quite often too, especially in technology. That if you're working with smart people in technology, they have opinions on how things want to get done. It doesn't always mean their opinion's right, doesn't always mean your opinion's right, but I do believe you should hear them out and come to a consensus together. And working in a level-headed mindset, you can actually do that. You can come to an agreement. I've had a few employees who, man, to be honest with you, I found them challenging at times because it was a smart person. Him and I'm saying him, but they and I were butting heads on a topic. And then when I say butting heads, I just wasn't aligning with them. But I was
Mhm.
maybe a little passive on it. Let's just circle back around to this again next week and circle next. And finally, after a few weeks, it took me a few weeks to understand their point of view, understand them, understand where they're coming from. And since that point, we work together beautifully now because I get their perspective. I get where they're coming from. Again, doesn't always mean their ideas are right, doesn't mean my ideas are right, but it allows me to manage them better because they recognize that I get where they're coming from and I can help align the business needs with how they think something should be done. So we're making progress together. I hope that answered the
Mhm.
question for you. I think it's just a matter of understanding people's opinions or differences
Yeah,
of opinion between you and someone else.
absolutely. And I think there's the beauty there in the differences because you can not only identify your own blind spots, but you can also collectively learn from each other.
Yeah.
Because if you and I agreed on everything, for example, even in the workplace, then we may make mistakes and we're not
Yeah.
recognizing the blind spots or the biases we may have. And then I'm not really learning, neither are you, right? I think there's that opportunity for learning, but it's really about your perspective and how you look at it. But I also think if we are grounded and we are emotionally regulated and we're confident in our abilities, then it's easier for us to also look at the different perspectives and see where we can learn. I think a lot of the times, because we feel insecure about our own beliefs, we feel threatened. And that's like, then we tend to project onto others saying, hey,
Yeah.
you're wrong, I'm right. And that's the problem there.
Yeah, what I found for that is we all can get, for a simplistic view of it, is defensive if someone else is telling us something is right that we think our opinion is right. And what I found quite often is if someone comes back to me with, we should do it this way, and I feel whether they're right or wrong, for some reason, I feel defensive on their answer. Instead of replying instantly, I'll let it marinate for what I call marinate for a day. I'll walk
Mhm,
away from it and say, I'll come back to that tomorrow. That gives me
mhm,
time to think about it and respond with a much more level head. And quite often in that thinking, I go through a process of like, oh, you know what? Their solution is right. So I've thought the different scenarios in my head and I come to the conclusion, actually, what they're saying is the right way to do it. Whereas if I responded immediately, I might not have had that same response.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and tend to see that in the therapy side too, where when we respond immediately, we're responding from a place of our emotions. And as
Hmm.
you can appreciate, when we're being emotional, we tend to our brain is really in that tunnel vision space, right? So we're
Yeah.
focused on the small picture, we're not seeing the bigger picture. And I think taking that time, like you said, letting it marinate not only allows us to approach the problem as in a more, I suppose, emotionally regulated way. And then we're able to see the bigger picture and even look at things. And maybe there's part of their solution that's, and then there's other things that you can identify, and then you can have a very healthy conversation rather than reacting in the moment. So I definitely
Absolutely.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Now, along the same lines, you mentioned your son's experience was something that really brought all of this to the forefront, and you were able to build on something from there. How were you able to identify that this is what he needs, right? Like, how were you able to figure out that maybe sending him a message daily will really help him with his struggles?
I think there's a few things that led up to that. And I'm not a psychologist, so I was a father just trying to help my son, is what I came down to. But something I haven't touched on much is around that same time, I had a few things happen in my life that made me realize things I was doing was helping others. And that was so when I go out, I live in a smaller community, let's say a lot of people know each other. When I was going out to some of the local stores here, I always try to put a smile on my face and be personable to the employees of the store. Ask them how their day's doing, little things, but just put a step forward in being kind to them while I'm there. On three separate occasions over the span of about 3 or 4 months, someone in a store approached me and it's out of nowhere. So it wasn't even asked. They said, just so you know, when you come to our store, everybody here who is working here is in a good mood for a half hour, an hour after you leave. You come in with an aura about you, and we all
Mhm,
so much appreciate why you're here. Though since it happened 3 times, it set in a little bit that wow, I'm making a difference just by being kind and courteous to people and how they feel
mhm,
about their day. That was the onset to me realizing that you can't help put people into a better position. Not everybody is. This isn't like a one solution fits all type thing, but you can,
mhm,
by your actions, affect others, is what it comes down to. And at that same time, when my son was having a little bit of depression, I'm labeling it, I'm not really sure if it was even really truly depression, but ultimately he was struggling with a little bit in high school. I
mhm,
in talking to him, I just thought, boy, he just needs I need to make sure he knows he's loved. I need to make sure he knows that people out there care about him. I need to remind him of this every day so it doesn't take a terrible turn because you hear about the
mhm,
stories. I didn't want to be part of those stories. And so I thought it was a simple step for me just to somehow send a message every day that was compassionate, to let him know people out there love him and let him think that he has things to be grateful for. And
mhm,
so the messages started around there. And I still tried to use messages that even at that point in time that weren't so much focused on him, but focused on my life events, on things that I recognize that I should be grateful for. And I think gratefulness is a big part of mental well being. Recognizing gratitude is huge. I've been in many conversations with counselors and therapists, and I've heard many people say who are in that profession, you can't have depression and gratitude at the same time. If you're
mhm,
recognizing gratitude, depression can't exist in your mind at that exact same time, which again, I just heard this. I'm not a psychologist, but I've heard it many times. And through the studies I've done in Take 2 Minutes, which I've done quite a few studies now, it has shown the same thing that once someone starts recognizing gratitude through different practices I've put in place, they change the wiring of their mind. They create new neural pathways and they recognize more gratitude naturally. And as you're recognizing more gratitude, you're naturally getting yourself into a better mindset. You're getting yourself to a point where you're out and about in the day and you just recognize something that you like and you're able to think about it and that puts you into a slightly better mood.
mhm. Absolutely. And I do want to come back to that gratitude piece for sure, because it aligns with everything, how we started the conversation around how our thoughts can really change our world, the world around us. But coming back to your son, so what I'm hearing there essentially is the basic human need of being seen, heard, or understood. And based on the messages you were sending him, ultimately for him, it must have been like, okay, my father sees me or my father understands me. And that can be huge, right? Especially when
Yeah.
you're, I can't even imagine as an adolescent, you're going through so many changes, and then schools are different now, and the environment and how we're connected socially is different now as opposed to when I was growing up. just having that can be huge for someone of that age. And I think that's ultimately what we need, right? So when we're struggling with these things and we go see a therapist, the therapist's role is really to see, hear you, and understand you.
Yeah.
So that was something that was happening there. So how did then, from a tech technological side, how did that become a process then? Like, how were you able to develop this into a process as you've described?
So are we talking about a process that is now take 2 minutes? Is that the question?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So after I met with that doctor of psychology, we had multiple meetings. I think we met an hour or two a week for multiple weeks where he was telling me activities that he had been trying. And they're all activities that are new activities, things that's been around in the positive psychology arena for decades. But he was trying different ones and he was measuring the results from his 28,000 participants in his program. And he was able to see which activities worked more. As I learned that, I started building out Take 2 minutes, which what is now Take 2 minutes. And it started off with just a few exercises, but then it's grown through customer feedback and through my learning. And I found some of the growth fascinating. At first, it was a gratitude journal and meditations, I think is what it was, the two things I started with.
Mhm.
As I started getting user feedback on gratitude or talking to people about gratitude, and this is going back to our gratitude practice, but I still think is so huge. If someone is really struggling mentally and you ask them what's something you're grateful for, the answer quite often is there's nothing. If they sit and think about it, I've seen people sit with a piece of paper for 5 or 10 minutes just blank. And I don't know, there's nothing I'm grateful for. And I realized at some point while building Take 2 minutes that this is a hump people have to get over. People have to realize there's things they're grateful for. And so I developed as a part of Take 2 minutes what's called the gratitude challenge. And the idea behind the gratitude challenge is for people who are new to gratitude journaling or people who are struggling with gratitude journaling. And what it does is every day it sends you a prompt for something that you should be grateful for. And it asks you to think of a reason why you are grateful for that. And I think it's 168 different prompts in the system. So there's a lot people can go through. But ultimately, they're simple things like the sun provides warmth and light to our planet. Think of a reason why you like the sun. And that gives that
Mhm.
person one thing to think about and one thing to write a statement about. And through my focus groups, I found that if someone is struggling with gratitude and they do the gratitude challenge, after about 10, 12, 14 days, what becomes a habit to us, they usually write me back and say, my gosh, when I go out on my own now, I'm just recognizing things I'm grateful for. So they've created those new neural pathways where they're recognizing things after 10, 12, 14 days, and they're able just to recognize gratitude on their own all over the place. And I think through my learning while developing Take 2 minutes of things just like this, I've been able to create a system that's even more in tune to helping individuals. And I've added more activities based upon customer feedback. One that's probably not as impactful, but just another example from customer feedback, because I had a few people say, really love the dream journal. Dream journaling is one of those things where you can take it as a mental well-being activity or just something that gets you in touch with your subconscious. There's still benefits to it, but I still added it because that aligns with everything I'm offering. Let's add that
Mhm.
into it as well. But I think to answer your question, it came from my son. I
Mhm.
started building it. As I started building it, I was certain to involve coaches, counselors, and therapists and psychologists all along the way on the activities to make sure I'm doing things in a way that aligned with their beliefs. And I got I have had many different ones involved in the processes. And I continued to build it out for, I think the first 5 years, I had it in what I'd call a perpetual beta, where I was just really adding features or tweaking features or making sure everything was well aligned with what was being recommended by that professional group.
Mhm. Yeah, no, and again, I appreciate you coming back to gratitude, and you're so right because that's exactly the process I went through when I first wanted to do it. I just couldn't. I just sat there and stared at my journal blankly,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I don't know what to write here, and it's crazy, right? Looking back, I'm like, what was wrong with me? But it's just our perspective is so limited at that time, right? And
Yeah.
as you've shared here, for me, after doing it consistently every day for 3 weeks or even a month, my perspective evolved, right? And then very much similar to what you've shared, it was the smallest things that I couldn't pick out initially, they started popping out. The smallest things and I started listing them. And even when I'm helping my clients start that gratitude piece or the journaling, it's the same conversation, right? They can't think of things and they're really struggling to even identify three. And that's exactly what I tell them. You have to keep at it. And then soon you'll start seeing the small things, having dinner with family or just going
Yeah.
for a walk or whatever it is. And it's just, as you've shared, it's consistently practicing it before it becomes a real habit. And then you're able to see all those things around you, which have always been there, right?
Yes.
And I
And it's
think
important.
yes, absolutely. And even in the meditation practices, a lot of times people say if you're going for a walk and you're meditating, try to look at for things that you have never seen before, even if you're walking the same path. And I think it's the same
Right.
idea, like identifying things that you don't necessarily think of when you're being grateful. And that again continues to expand. And then that's where I think when I was sharing earlier is how our thoughts can really affect our reality. Because if you start seeing everything around you, something that you can be grateful for or have positivity around, then everything around you starts changing, right? Then if
Yeah.
the world isn't as grim and gloomy as it may have been in the past. And I think that's a lot of the times what can help people navigate it, even if they're struggling with depression or have depressive thoughts, that it's not too bad. And often when you're struggling with depression, you're just in that perpetual cycle where you continue to identify all the things that are going wrong and why you should not be happy.
Yeah, it's easy to get into that negative spiral is what I call it
Yeah.
sometimes. I think we touched on it either on our initial conversation or prior to this call that there's a lot of negativity in the world. Media acts upon our innate desire to pull out negativity. It's something
Mhm.
that's just embedded in our systems from centuries ago when we had to be aware of bears and
Yeah.
saber-tooth tigers and what have you. So we recognize threats. We're very open and it's almost like we're looking for the threats. When in reality, if you start looking for the positives, you can get yourself into a more positive mindset generally.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think fear sells.
Uh,
And I think when we're on high alert and we're constantly in fear, we're in that stress response, and that's not healthy for us. But that's how we consume information, and that is a problem. But when, to your point, when we're focused on the positive and we're more in a relaxed state where our nervous system is calm, we're not really getting triggered by things around us. So it's easier to shut
Right.
off all that noise and operate very effectively throughout the day. But then we're not a good consumer
Right.
of some of
Right.
the
Yeah.
media and
We're not a
media.
good
So
consumer then. Yes.
yeah. So it's hard
And
to
some
sell, right?
people,
And even
it
yeah.
is. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just think it's funny because I've done some courses on marketing too, and essentially that's it. How do you get people's attention when you're trying to sell a product? It's trying to tell them that, hey, here's a problem and we have a solution, right?
Yes.
So,
And some people, I've heard conversations and been a part of conversations where they're like, "Well, you're ignoring the problems." And I think it's not so much ignoring the problems. I think what you touched on. It's recognizing which problems you want to react to and which ones you should react to. So the world is unfortunately full of problems. Even our daily lives are full of problems. And something I say quite often is positive psychology, the activities that take 2 minutes, gratitude journaling, and recognizing gratitude. Those aren't there to make you always happy, right? So there's never a situation where we're happy 24/7 every day of the year. There's problems in life. There's stressors, there's work, there's relationships, there's death. There's all kinds of reasons why you're going to have other emotions besides happiness. My idea of positive psychology and the activities I promote are for individuals to be generally in a happier position. But when those life events happen and you are in a bad mood, you are stressed, you are grieving, you are able to recognize you're going through something and work your way through it, right? And let's use grieving. Grieving is different for everybody. There is no what is a turn that frown upside down type thing. If you're grieving, you're going to be sad. You need to grieve as long as you need to grieve. But ultimately, through positive psychology, when you're ready, you know how to dig yourself out of that so you're not
mhm,
going to let it go on indefinitely.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I agree. And I think that can become for a lot of people, when you're grieving or you're dealing with something, some sort of loss, you can easily get trapped in that, right? And I think that's where the gratitude
Yeah.
piece again is helpful, that you can accept whatever you're going through and accept the emotions that come with it, but knowing that there is another side to it, right? Or I'm going to get through
Right.
this. And I feel like a lot of the times people get stuck in the sadness or whatever that emotion is, and then they can't claw themselves out of it. So that's where the problem really exists. And again, I think problems do exist, but it's how we relate to them and how we internalize them, right? Knowing that, okay, this is a problem, I will have to deal with it, but it shouldn't
Mhm.
change everything for me right now.
Yes.
And I think we get consumed by these things and these stressors all around us. And I think a majority of the time, this is just my view, the stress itself is self-induced.
Yeah. It really can be. There's problems in life, right? It's how you deal with them as to how much stress it's going to cause you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. You've talked about the gratitude piece, but I'm wondering, are there other activities that are incorporated here, and what do they look like, and how are they then helping people work through some of the stressors that do come up, as we've touched on? So, how are people then
Yeah.
able to connect with the stress and manage them?
Yeah, I want to talk about two activities I think work really well together and the reasons why they work well together and how you should use them. And as I has talked about in the past, these activities can be done without take 2 minutes. You can do them on a pen and paper. It doesn't matter how you do them. It's just recognition of how to do them properly and why they help you. So first, we talked about gratitude journaling. I've done a few focus groups, and in the focus groups, I had the individuals, and I've done, I think about 35 people have gone through the focus groups now. They all started with a short questionnaire. It's called the Modified Differential Emotion Scale Questionnaire, MDES questionnaire. And the purpose of the MDES questionnaire is to ask you 20 questions, which kind of ranks your negativity against your positivity, gives the system a score of how positive you are and how negative you are generally. And that questionnaire asks you to reflect on the last week. So the idea behind it is those 20 questions, if you reflect on your last week, give the system an idea of how negative and positive you are. They all start with that. That gives me a baseline of their negativity and their positivity. From there, they were all prescribed, for lack of better terms, gratitude journaling. And again, if someone wasn't good at gratitude journaling, they did a gratitude challenge. But I usually promoted to do 30 days of gratitude journaling. So if they did a gratitude challenge, they can start with 10, 12, 15 days of the gratitude challenge. And then the latter half move to the gratitude journals. That's exercise one. That's for 30 days. During that 30 days, um, about the 15-day mark. And real quickly, gratitude journaling, I always tell people do that in the morning. You want to do it shortly after you wake up to think of something you're grateful for. So you start
Mm,
your day off on the right foot with the gratitude statement. After about 15 days, they were then given a second activity, which is a three good things activity. A three good things activity is huge in my mind. It's been so highly researched. There's so much data behind it. The idea behind the three good things activity, and I see a lot of people misusing this one. And when I say misusing, if someone's doing it, they're doing something good. They're not doing any harm to themselves. But really, a three good things activity is a reflection on the day. So it should be done in the evening. And the idea behind it is you reflect on the in the evening about your past day and you write down three good things about that day. They could be
mm,
things you witnessed, it could be something you did, it could be something that happened to you, but it's just really taking a few moments to reflect on the day and think of three good things. So that starts at day 15 and goes to day 30. These two exercises open your day with gratitude and close your day with gratitude. The closing of the day through the research shows to have a enormous impact because what
mm,
happens is you put your mind into a positive state before you go to bed. When you go to sleep, your subconscious actually works on that positivity to create these new neural pathways. You're priming your brain to recognize positivity
mm,
is what happens. So that priming of those new neural pathways, you wake up with new neural pathways, new priming, the ability to recognize positivity a little bit easier. The data from the doctor at Duke University that shared with me, she found that it only takes 15 days of a three good things activity to have a lasting effect on your mental well being for up to 4 to 6 months after you stop the activity. So in my
Mm,
case studies, again, we started with an MDS questionnaire. We did 30 days of gratitude journaling. At day 15, they did 15 days of three good things. So days 15 through 30, you were gratitude journaling in the morning and three good things in the evening. At the end of day
mm,
30, they took a break for 5 days ish. And then at day 35, they took a second MDS questionnaire to get another score for their negativity and positivity. Those two activities, and again, my sample size is only 35 people roughly, so it's not as huge as the samples I'd like for it to be. But in those 35 people, I was able to show 95% of the participants had at least a 200% in positivity after just
mm.
35 days, which is huge. Just two
Yeah.
activities that take you a couple minutes a day that can really help change your mindset, create those new neural pathways, prime your brain to recognize positivity so you are in a better state ongoing for months afterwards.
No, and I appreciate that because as you touched on, the sample size is small. So, if you were to do it over a large sample size, maybe the numbers get normalized a bit more, but 95% is still pretty significant. So it can't be something that you can just dismiss. I appreciate that too. One of the things that I really like about what you're sharing here is especially before going to bed, right? So if we tend to go to bed with a negative mindset, it will impact us, right? Because you're going to carry
Yeah.
that negativity in as much as you don't think you are, but into the following day as you wake up. So that's huge that you've touched on there. Now, what are you seeing in terms of like, are people actually able to really identify things that are different in terms of a lot of the times people will continue to talk about the same things, right? Oh, I have a roof over my head. I'm just giving that as an example to be grateful for, or
Right.
something I've done that's positive. Are you seeing an evolution in terms of the things they're also identifying and focusing on throughout the 15 days or 30 days?
So again, if you use a gratitude challenge, it forces you to recognize new things. If you use the gratitude journaling, and I wrote the whole system is my code, but I can't honestly say I remember every little line of code I
Yeah.
have in there. But I do believe there is some logic where if you repeat a gratitude journal entry from the previous day, it asks you to try to think of something new. But
Mm,
ultimately, there's going to be repetition. People are going to I think I have a few answers here. One is people sometimes pick the low hanging fruit, right? I'm
yep.
grateful for my family. I
Yeah.
try to challenge people to think of more, and that's a great one for your first 5 days. Definitely. You should be grateful for your family, grateful for your children, grateful for your pets, things like that. Those are great things to recognize. But I do believe one of the bigger challenges, and I've heard a counselor who I work with a lot mention this one a lot. He often says, try to have every day have a different topic for 30 days. So you should have 30 days of gratitude journal entries every day be something completely different. And I think that is a good challenge for people to do because if you are aware of it, if you're going back and looking at your previous statements and you create a new one every day, that is really expanding your recognition of gratitude instead of trying to stick with the same topics.
Yeah, for sure. No, I appreciate that. And again, the simplicity of it, take 2 minutes. The idea, at least how I interpret it when I hear it, is it all only takes 2 minutes. So do you see people responding to that in a more positive way because it's not a huge time commitment and the simplicity of it can be very appealing that, hey, it's only 2 minutes. That's not a huge ordeal.
That's the idea of the application is take 2 minutes. You're supposed to be taking 2 minutes out of your day for yourself every day. In reality, if you're doing multiple exercises, you're probably spending more than 2 minutes. But the goal is each exercise can be done in roughly 2 minutes. Now, if you start talking about meditation, right? Take 2 minutes offers. We do have 2 minute meditations. We also have 3, 4, 5, 6 minute meditations, 10 minute meditations. If you're doing a 10 minute meditation, obviously you're not going to do it in 2 minutes.
Right.
But again, the overall premise is a lot of our activities, gratitude journaling, the gratitude challenge, the happiness jar, the grounding exercise is huge if people are struggling with anxiety. Those are all exercises you can do in about 2 minutes for an exercise. And they are all things that can help you in some way if you are struggling. The grounding exercise, to talk about that briefly, that's more focused on anxiety, right? So anxiety is the worrying about the future, the what ifs. What if this happens? Oh my gosh, this is coming up, and stressing about things in the future that may or may not happen. The grounding exercise helps bring you back into the present moment. And again, it's an activity, it takes about 2 minutes. And I'm happy to talk about the grounding exercise more if you want to hear about it more.
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, for sure.
So the grounding exercise is one that's prescribed again by therapists quite often. And I use I think it's the 4-3-2-1 activity
Hmm.
is what it is. So the idea is first off, the application I've developed is largely a text-based communication platform. You can use the web app, which is a progressive web app. It works on your phone like a phone app, but you
Hmm.
can use the web app to do all these exercises, or you can text things back to us. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're having a bit of a panic attack, you're stressed, you have some anxiety, you can feel that anxiety coming on. You can text back to my platform, I have anxiety. It's going to reply to you via text message with a link to a meditation that's really focused on anxiety and calming you down, as well as the grounding exercise link. The grounding exercise is one I love, and I do love to talk about it because similar to the gratitude journaling, there's a right and wrong way of doing it. The 4-3-2-1 exercise starts off with list four things you can see. In my mind, of course, assuming you have good vision, you should be able to quickly see four things around you.
Hmm.
That's almost a bit of a topical step one, right? It's really easy to glance around and see things. The second one, though, is three things you can feel. That gets a little bit more in depth because what are you feeling right now? And people like, I don't know, what do I feel right now? It's really a physically. We're talking about physically, what are you feeling right now? So
Hmm.
physically, I can feel my sits bone against my chair. Physically, I can feel my chair arms against my elbows. I have my feet crossed also, so I can feel my ankle against my other calf. Those are things I'm physically feeling. That actually makes you think about your body and think about physically what am I feeling and where. The next one then asks you to list two things you can hear. That's even more complicated because if you're in an office, if you're in your home, maybe you have good sound dampening, maybe you're not hearing much. And I tell people these are not ones you want to skip over. You don't want to answer nothing. You want to really sit there, maybe close your eyes and evaluate your environment. And then you're going to pick up something. Maybe it's a bird chirping outside. Maybe it's a train out in the distance. Who knows what it is, but you got to sit and think about that. That process of you sitting and thinking and spending a few moments to focus is what's really bringing you back into the present, right? If you skip over those tough
Yeah.
questions, you're not doing the exercise any justice.
Hmm.
And the same happens for the list one thing you smell. That can be a really tough one. But again, close your eyes, take some breaths, give it a few minutes because those few minutes is what's helping you come back into the present and stop worrying about the future activity, which may or may not happen the way you're stressing about it.
Yeah, no, and I love that grounding exercise because exactly to your point, especially if you're focusing on the past or you're anxious about the future, it does bring you back to the present and it does truly ground you. And it is definitely an effective exercise. So thank you for sharing that. So the last piece I do want to go over is because you mentioned this whole app and everything, this mission you've taken on is a non for profit. So why did you go down that route?
That's a great question. And again, this was to go back to the doctor of psychology who gave me a lot of information, which I use in this. He suggested that I make it a nonprofit. And what he said, which I love this, because you don't want to profit on the suffering of other people. And I
Mhm.
really, that set into me. If I'm here to help people, I shouldn't be profiting off of other people's struggles. I should be trying to just truly just help them because that it is a nonprofit. I was new to the world of nonprofits. I'm still definitely learning more about nonprofits. I would say every day. It's not my area of expertise, but I definitely learned a lot about it. The mission of Take 2 Minutes is to help people. And that's why I'm on these podcasts. It's not even really in my mind promoting Take 2 Minutes. It's really promoting the activities that people can do to help themselves. A grinding exercise, good or bad, you don't have to take 2 minutes for that grind exercise. You can sit down at a bench somewhere and do that on your own time. But I
Right.
think it's making awareness about these activities that people want to use Take 2 minutes. I thank them gratefully because it does help me continue offering the service. It's one of those things where what I found interesting is I've had a lot of people say to me, why did this service cost? if it's a nonprofit. Even though it's a nonprofit, there are still a lot of operating expenses. Even though I'm not getting paid anything and I never have been paid anything, there's still a lot of operating expenses. The system
Mhm,
runs on 14 servers. It's got redundancies. So ideally, it's almost always there. In
mhm,
addition to the 14 servers, it's got a large texting bill. I mentioned texting is my main form of communication out to people. And so I get charged for every text message that it receives, every text message it sends out.
mhm,
So because of all those costs, it has to be a service that I'm charging for. Either that or I
mhm,
have to get a whole lot of donations to pay for free users. And I do have a process where if we do get donations, we try to just give those to users who are in need, who can't afford it, give licenses to those people. But ultimately, the goal is to help people, is what it comes
mhm.
down to, and not looking to profit off of people suffering.
Yeah, no, I thank you for sharing that, and that is noble, and I think that is sometimes the struggle I have when I see a lot of these things online where there's trying to sell products to people and take advantage of their suffering or vulnerability. So it's very rare in the world today that there's people like you out there. So I appreciate the work you're doing. Now, what then? Because a lot of the times you need to be able to, and I'm just curious to explore this with you. Like you need to be able to
Yeah.
connect some sort of, okay, I am, I'm putting in all this work and there is some financial reward for it. It doesn't have to be huge, but then how do you motivate yourself to keep working through the challenges and sometimes the workload and navigating some of the complexities, even around the coding and all of the work that goes into this behind the scenes? How do you motivate yourself? And I'm wondering if this is part of the purpose piece there.
No, I haven't been asked that, and I appreciate the new questions. Definitely, I think I get motivation truly from helping others. So I
Mm,
had a very in-depth conversation about this with a counselor, and we went down I don't know, almost to say a rabbit hole about this with individuals. And I think one way someone can find happiness in their life is to find purpose. If you have purpose, you are fulfilling a portion of your needs. And I think I have found some purpose in this communication. I think I am sometime, let's say around 2010, 2011, I started recognizing how to be a healthier person, how to be a little bit happier person. I started recognizing this is what 13, 14 years ago now. I started recognizing that if I can't control something, I really shouldn't let it bother me a whole lot. If there
mm,
are things that are outside of my control, why am I stressing about those? And during that learning phase for me, 14-ish years ago, I started living a life that I felt a little bit more carefree, a little bit more calm, a little bit more zen centered, however you want to word it. And I appreciated how I was living. I appreciated it more because I wasn't always wound tightly. I wasn't always angry at everything. I wasn't always lashing out at people because I didn't agree with them. And I found that because of that, I was a happier person generally. And again, happiness, we can't, want to talk about fake positivity or false positivity. It was just truly, I was in a better mood usually. And I was able to um, outwardly help others with my positivity and happiness. And because of all that, I got a sense of fulfillment from that. And I
mm,
think I built up on that for Take 2 Minutes. And my motivation for Take 2 Minutes is ideally to get more people to recognize these things exist. When I see someone walking around mad because someone didn't agree with them on a topic, I feel a little bit like, boy, I want to help them because you shouldn't let a disagreement really negatively affect your emotions. You shouldn't let something you can't control at all. You can't let someone else's opinion make you mad. Now, you can debate their opinion, definitely. You can discuss their opinion, but to actually have anger out of it, I think is, I hate to say a waste of time. I'm not exactly sure how to word it, but I think that you could probably address the situation better and
mhm,
cause less stress and detriment to your well-being
mhm.
in that situation. I think all those things are reasons that motivate me to try just to help others recognize, hey, if we're kind to each other and we get along and respect each other, it's going to go a lot farther than hate and anger.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. And there is research also that supports the whole notion of people that do acts of service, the positivity and gratitude they experience as well is significant. So that's what I'm hearing from you is your service to others is also paying yourself in terms of the rewards and
Yeah.
the feeling you have. terms of the gratitude and the fulfillment around all of that, right? In terms of the purpose you're living out.
Yeah, I think if we have purpose, you feel more complete and you have a sense of accomplishment easier. And it's a good exercise for people to take another step into this. If I have plenty of times, and I know a lot of people, I talk about this. If you have 20 tasks to do, let's say your job is just overloading you with work. And I know there's plenty of days I wake up with, this is my list of things to do. How am I going to get them all done? It's a sense of accomplishment which helps motivate you. So what I do, and there's all kinds of theories on this, and I think you can debate these theories also, but I will then take the tasks I know I can complete quickly and get them out of the way. That way I accomplished something. I
Mhm.
feel better about the work. I'm more motivated and I can then start stepping into the more difficult tasks. Now there's a different theory on that. I can't remember what it's like something to do with fraud, where you take the toughest task first.
Mhm.
So it's a different thought, but I have just always found if you accomplish something, that helps motivate you. That helps you have a sense of accomplishment and you're ready to take on more tasks. So I know when I'm struggling with, I have all these things to do. Let's knock out some of the easy ones. I'll feel like I'm getting things done and I can start taking on the more challenging ones. And
Yeah, yeah. Along the same lines, there's a lot of talk about just waking up and simply setting your bed. And that's
yeah,
like starting your day on the right footing, right? You've accomplished something. And when you look at it objectively, you may even question that and be like, what do you mean by setting your bed? That's just so simple. Exactly. It's the simplicity of it. And to your point, you've already started your day by accomplishing something. So now you're getting that dopamine release in your system, which is motivating you further to keep on that same path, right? And build that momentum. So I definitely agree with you. Now, Mark, I know you've shared a lot of the ways in terms of people finding some of these activities and in the different platforms that are available. But how can people go and find Take 2 minutes and how can they access that? What are some ways they can do that? And also, if people are wanting to support your mission, because you said you guys do take donations, how can they do that as well? So then they're also paying it forward for other people.
that's great. I appreciate it. So take 2 minutes is at take2minutes.org. So again, take2minutes.org, take number 2minutes.org. On the Take 2 Minutes website, if you're signing up, there is a uh, entry box for your phone number. Again, it's largely text based for communication. So the sign up process is your telephone, your mobile phone number, not your email address or home phone number, but our landline, your mobile phone. Your system will send you a text verification code. You enter the code and you are signed up. This right now, and this is October of 2024 as we're talking about this. And for probably a couple months going forward, there is a promotion where if you sign up and you wanting to get an account for a child, because I've been talking to a lot of parents who have children that are struggling. Right now, if you sign up as a parent, you can get a free account for a child as well. And that's going to be ongoing for a few months. And Take 2 Minutes has what's called the group functionality, which just as a quick overview will allow a parent to give an access code to a child. When I say a child, ideally 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, middle school, late or early high school, middle school timeframe. That parent then can see the activities the child's doing because the parent extends a license via a code to their child. The child signs up, and the parent can promote things like in discussion with your child. Hey, I think you should start trying a gratitude journal or start with a gratitude challenge. The parent can then look at the child's account to see if they're doing the activities. The child's data is still private, so the parent can't see what the child's entering, but the parent can actually look at the account and say, "Oh, look, they're actually doing it. They did a gratitude challenge today. They did a 3 good things. They meditated today." The parent can see the activities and get some kind of positive feedback that the child's actually partaking in them. It also gives the parent discussion points. What did you write? Say you want to talk about it? Or how did you like the meditation today?
Mhm.
And I think those are great segues for a parent to help a child that is struggling a bit with things that happen in high school and middle school these days that makes life very different and more difficult for children. But anyway, so Take 2 minutes. We're talking about org. When you sign up, there is the second step, ask which plan you want. You can select a plan. There's a donate button at the top if you want to offer a donation. Again, with donations, my goal is to take whatever monetary number it is and just give that many licenses out for free to people who need them. And on the website, there are means to get in touch with me. I'm also on LinkedIn, so you can also find me. I'm happy to have conversations.
That's great, Mark. Thank you so much. We'll put that in the show notes so people can find it. But thank you so much for coming on here, sharing your own personal story and what's allowed you to enter this work and what motivates you, and also the incredible work you're doing. So thank you for all of that. Really appreciate your time and everything you're doing.
Thank you for having me. It was a wonderful conversation. I appreciate the great questions.